Picture a man on the periphery of a battlefield, not with a blade, but with a tempest raging in his mind. Fear, anger, confusion, each emotion looms to devour him. And still, he does not blink. He does not whine. He does not break. This man is not a soldier. He is a Stoic, and what he has with him is something more powerful than any gun, a philosophy that has endured for over 2,000 years. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Most modern men are drowning. Drowning in distractions, in fake validation, in emotions they can't control. We live in a world where weakness is rewarded, where excuses are celebrated, and where discipline has become almost extinct. But the old Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, they existed in a much harsher world than us, and they survived anyway. They were tested by death, by betrayal, by poverty, by exile, by even enslavement. And yet they created steel out of the fire of agony. The question is, why aren't men today doing the same? Why do so many men break under the pressure of life when the wisdom to stick it out has already been penned centuries ago? This video isn't about squishy advice. It is not about motivation, motivational fluff. It is about harsh, ageless wisdom, the kind that peels away your excuses and makes you see reality as it is. Because here's the truth. If modern men applied ancient Stoic wisdom, they would not be weak, lost, or dependent. They would be unshakable. So in this story, you're going to discover 10 core Stoic lessons, the exact rules that made men of the past unbreakable, and the rules that men of today desperately need to reclaim. And lesson 1 begins with the most difficult thing you'll ever face. Yourself, the Stoics' harsh but freeing law. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. Consider how much time men waste griping traffic, the economy, other people's opinions, the weather, the past, all beyond your control. Epictetus, who was born into slavery, knew this better than most. He wrote, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. If you lose your job, you can't control the economy. If someone betrays you, you can't control them. But you can control how you react. You can control whether you fold or evolve." This is where contemporary men are failing. They place their whole identity in outside sources, money, status, relationships, and when those outside sources fall apart, so do they. But not the Stoic man, because his strength does not reside on the outside. It resides on the inside. And here is the cold, hard truth. If you can't control yourself, you'll never be able to control anything else. Modern men pursue convenience, soft mattresses, unlimited entertainment, junk food, but the Stoics pursued its opposite. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, slept on the floor in order to remind himself that men become weak through luxury. Seneca lived in poverty, eating plain meals, wearing coarse clothing, voluntarily, not out of necessity, because he understood that comfort was a deceiver. If you desire strength, you need to suffer on purpose. Not foolishly, but on purpose. Cold showers, tough workouts, fasting, early rising, not because they are enjoyable, but because they callous your mind. Seneca periodically would ask himself, "Is this the state I so dreaded?" By conditioning himself to be uncomfortable, he learned that he could endure anything. But contemporary men, they freak out at the first perception of pain. They bail when life gets uncomfortable, and that is the reason for weakness that is contagious. The Stoics understood the man who chooses discomfort is already more powerful than 99% of humanity. And this is only the first rule, because the next Stoic principle is one that annihilates the ego, the silent foe within every man. Ego is the enemy. The Stoics taught this with no quarter. Pride, arrogance, self-importance. These are the shackles that render men weak. Consider, how many men do not learn because they already think they know? How many men break at criticism because their ego cannot endure a scratch? And how many men spend their lives pursuing validation by others rather than pursuing mastery of themselves? Epictetus once stated, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." That is the ego trap. It leads you to believe that you are ahead of where you actually are. The Stoics were ruthless when it came to killing ego. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, the most powerful man on the planet, wrote himself everyday reminders such as, "Remember you are just a man. Remember you will die. Remember your power is borrowed and temporary." And then contrast that with today's men blowing themselves up on social media, thumbs ups, pursuing virtual validation like it means anything. The Stoics would ridicule this weakness. This is the lesson. When your ego is huge, your strength is false. It is strong on the surface, but the slightest insult or setback will break you. But when your ego is tiny, your strength is genuine. You are not wobbly because you have nothing to prove. Seneca said it best. He who boasts of his achievements diminishes them. That is, the more loudly you must brag, the weaker you are in reality. But the ugly truth is that most men today will never break their ego. They will be imprisoned by their own pride, offended by everything, fragile in every way, performing all the time. A Stoic man does just the opposite. He does not have to boast. He does not have to demonstrate his worth. He speaks through his discipline, his resilience, and his actions. And the second rule is even more difficult, facing death, because death was what Stoic men were centered around, and contemporary men are afraid of it more than anything. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that is what today's men tend to forget. They seek approval on social media. They care about opinions from people who don't even know their name, and they break under criticism, but the Stoics thought differently. They conditioned themselves to stay firm when life tossed them around. Epictetus, a slave-turned-philosopher, was a teacher of freedom as being internal, not external. A man in shackles, beaten and possessed by another. And yet he felt more free than the rest of us mindlessly swiping away on a lit screen. Why? Because his feelings weren't locked up. His thoughts weren't tied to the next dopamine kick. This is where contemporary men need Stoic wisdom. Life will rain rejection, betrayal, and failure in your face. You cannot prevent that. But you can choose whether those times shatter you or make you unbreakable. The Stoics thought that hardship was not a curse, but an examination, an ordeal that exposes the metal of steel. And if today's man would come to possess this attitude, he would cease to flee from suffering and would instead utilize it to forge strength. Seneca long ago wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And if you take a moment to think, you'll realize how accurate that is. Most men nowadays aren't ruined by actual adversity. They're ruined by the tales they tell themselves. They overthink, they worry, and they allow fear of what could go wrong to immobilize them. The Stoics were familiar with this trap, and they had an antidote, discipline of thought. Rather than asking, "What if it all falls apart?" they would ask, "What if I can get through it? What if I can overcome it?" That mindset alone turned them into warriors of the mind. When Marcus Aurelius encountered plagues, wars, and betrayal, he did not devolve into panic. He just reminded himself, "This is not new. This has happened to thousands of men before me, and I can get through it too." Contemporary men might spare themselves decades of agony if they adopted this Stoic principle. Rather than being swamped with anxiety, they'd condition their minds to confront reality head on, which is why the Stoics engaged in negative visualization, visualizing the removal of comfort, wealth, or even life itself. It wasn't to despond them, it was to harden them, because by imagining the worst that could happen already, nothing in real life can break you. And so, As you take a step back and behold the wisdom of the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, you see something mighty. Their teachings weren't intended for philosophers with their feet propped up in ivory towers. They were hard, fought realities for men who endured wars, betrayal, illness, exile, and even death. Contemporary men, swimming in distractions, stress, and superficiality, are in greater need of this wisdom than ever before. The world advises you to pursue pleasure, eschew pain, and trade your value for likes and dollars. But the Stoics understood something else. Strength lies within. Power isn't handed to you. It is constructed in quiet, forged in self-control, and proven in hardship. If you live merely for comfort, your mind will stay weak. But if you live according to Stoic principles, managing what you can, accepting what you cannot, practicing adversity, and striding through life with courage, then no disappointment can shatter you. Your ego will disintegrate, but from its ruins, your real strength will emerge, because ultimately, the Stoics didn't merely instruct men how to think. They instructed men how to live, and how to live so that no chaos, no deception, no loss could ever strip them of their strength. So do remember, you don't have to be someone else. You need only master yourself. That is at the core of ancient Stoic teaching, and it is precisely what men need today.